April of 1945 arrived in Arizona with a sun that felt less like warmth and more like judgment. At Camp Florence, the desert stretched outward in every direction, pale and endless, swallowing sound and distance alike. When the transport truck rolled to a stop and its engine died, the silence felt unnatural, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Greta Hoffman stood at the edge of the tailgate, her wrists still marked by rope burns, her mouth dry, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She was 22 years old, and everything she had ever been taught told her that this was where cruelty began. She stepped down into the dust expecting shouts, blows, snarling dogs, anything that matched the stories she had heard since childhood. She had been raised on warnings, on whispered certainty passed from one generation to the next. Her grandmother's voice still rang in her ears, sharp and urgent, spoken months earlier in the chaos of a Munich train station as Allied bombs thundered in the distance. "They will starve you. They will beat you. They will parade you like an animal. Die with honor. Do not let them break you." Greta had nodded then, believing every word, because belief was all she had left. Behind her, the other women climbed down from the truck one by one. 12 of them in total, nurses, clerks, radio operators like Greta herself, captured in different places, processed through different holding camps, but united by the same rigid posture. Their backs were straight, their chins level, their expressions carefully empty. These were the daughters of a collapsing Reich, taught that dignity meant silence and endurance, that mercy was a trick, and survival without suffering was shameful. A woman approached them across the packed earth, and Greta felt her stomach tighten. This was it, she thought. This was where the performance dropped away. But the figure walking toward them did not carry a rifle. She carried a clipboard. Her uniform was pressed, her movements precise, her expression unreadable. Dark hair was pinned neatly back from her face. When she stopped a few paces away and spoke, she did so in flawless German. "My name is Lieutenant Sarah Tanaka. Welcome to Camp Florence. Follow me for processing." No shouting followed. No insults. No raised hands. The women exchanged glances, confusion flickering across faces trained not to reveal it. Greta felt suspicion coil tighter in her chest. This had to be theater, she told herself. Calm before cruelty. A lie designed to soften them before the real punishment began. Processing took just over an hour. Names were recorded. Items inventoried. Instructions delivered in clipped, neutral tones. They were led to wooden barracks that smelled faintly of pine sap and desert dust. Greta paused at her assigned bunk, staring at the thin mattress as if it might vanish if she looked away. A bar of white soap rested on the pillow, clean and untouched. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands, waiting for the trick to reveal itself. "Where are the whips?" whispered Anna, the youngest among them, her voice trembling despite her effort to control it. "Where are the dogs?" No one answered. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered, because they were all thinking the same thing. The dinner bell rang at exactly 1800 hours. Greta walked toward the mess hall braced for disappointment, for thin soup or moldy bread, for proof that the world made sense again. Instead, the smell hit her like a blow. Roasting meat. Yeast. Butter. Coffee. Real coffee. Her stomach clenched so hard she nearly doubled over. Inside, an American mess sergeant stood behind the serving line, ladle in hand, smiling as if this were any ordinary evening. Greta didn't understand his English, but she understood the gesture as he motioned for her tray. What landed on it made her hands shake. A thick slab of beef roast, pink at the center. Mashed potatoes with butter melting into them. Green beans. A fresh roll still steaming. Canned peaches swimming in syrup. Greta stared down at it, breath shallow, disbelief spreading through her chest. "This is American prison food," she whispered, barely audible even to herself. Before she could lift her fork, a sharp slap sent it clattering to the floor. Lissel Weber stood beside her, older, harder, eyes blazing with certainty. "Don't touch it," Lissel hissed. "It's poisoned. They want us to think we're safe. They're testing us." The explanation made sense. Of course it did. You didn't feed your enemies like this unless you were playing a cruel game. Greta nodded faintly, fear flooding back into the space where confusion had briefly lived. Then Lieutenant Tanaka sat down across from them. She set her tray on the table. It was identical to theirs. Every portion the same. Without ceremony, she cut into her beef and took a bite. She chewed, swallowed, and met Greta's eyes calmly. "Geneva Convention," she said. "Article 26. Prisoners receive the same rations as the captor nation's troops. It's law." The world tilted. That night, long after lights out, Greta lay awake on her bunk, the desert heat lingering even in darkness. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small, cold piece of beef she had hidden without thinking. In the shadows, she lifted it to her mouth. It tasted like treason. It tasted like truth. The tears came without permission. The days that followed unraveled everything she thought she knew. Work details were assigned. Greta found herself on laundry duty, hauling heavy, wet uniforms beneath the sun. It was exhausting but straightforward. 8 hours a day. 80 cents credited in camp script. By the end of the week, she held the paper vouchers in her hand, stunned by the absurdity of it. Money. Earned. For work. In a prison. At the canteen, she bought toothpaste, Rayon writing paper, a pencil. She waited for someone to laugh, to snatch them away, but no one did. The clerk barely looked up. Anna bought cigarettes she didn't smoke, clutching them like proof that this strange new reality was real. Greta watched Lieutenant Tanaka closely. Sarah moved through the camp enforcing rules with quiet precision, punishing violations without anger or cruelty. When a guard tried to skip a prisoner's dessert as a joke, Sarah reassigned him to night watch for a month. When Lissel hoarded bread, it was confiscated without comment. Greta couldn't understand it. Sarah should have hated them. Greta had overheard enough to know that Sarah's own family had been imprisoned, that her brother had died fighting for a country that locked up its own citizens. And yet she treated enemy prisoners with fairness that felt almost unbearable. One evening, Sarah found Greta alone in the barracks, staring at a blank page. "Writer's block?" Sarah asked. Greta looked up. "I don't know what to tell my family," she said. "If they're even alive." "The truth is usually a good place to start," Sarah replied. "The truth is I'm treated better here than I ever was at home," Greta said, the words sharp with guilt. "I eat steak while they starve." Sarah said nothing for a long moment. Then she placed a worn German-English dictionary on the bunk. "It's not mercy," she said. "It's law. There's a difference." Greta turned the dictionary's pages that night, lingering over words like restraint, justice, mercy. They felt heavy in her mouth, unfamiliar and dangerous. Weeks passed. English words came more easily. Greta taught younger prisoners in exchange for dessert rations. Even Lissel listened once, arms crossed, silent and disapproving. Greta told herself she wanted to understand what the Americans were saying, but the truth ran deeper than that. 3 months slipped by before the routine shattered. Lieutenant Tanaka assembled the women and marched them to the camp theater. No explanation. The projector hummed. Sarah's voice cut through the room. "The war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered. You will watch these films." The images that followed broke something inside Greta that could never be repaired. Bodies stacked like firewood. Survivors who looked less alive than dead. Camps liberated too late. Greta fled the theater, vomiting into the desert sand, the truth burning its way through her. "I didn't know," she sobbed when Sarah found her. "I know," Sarah said quietly. And then she told Greta about her own losses. About loyalty and law and restraint. About how following the rules was the only thing keeping her from becoming something she despised. The guilt came later, heavier than any punishment. When the Red Cross letter arrived telling Greta her family was gone, something inside her went numb. She stopped eating. She stopped caring. Lissel's accusations cut deep, and when the fight came, it came like a storm. Greta woke up in isolation, alone with her thoughts and the unbearable question of whether survival itself was a betrayal. Sarah's words reached her through the bars days later. Survival, she said, was not a choice Greta had made. But what she did with it could be. When Greta was released, repatriation loomed. Germany lay in ruins. No family waited for her. No home. Only questions. Then Sarah handed her a letter. A missing daughter. A desperate mother. A chance to help. Greta translated. She wrote. She searched. And when the reply came saying the daughter had been found alive, Greta cried harder than she had since the night she tasted steak in the dark. The Red Cross needed workers. Translators. Bridges. When the call came, Greta raised her hand. On her final report, she wrote carefully, honestly, and signed her name. She had arrived expecting cruelty. She had been given law. She did not understand mercy, but she had witnessed it. And she would spend the rest of her life trying to pass it forward.